Hey, everybody's emailing me this morning about what Ross Coulthard's saying about Tic Tac being a Lockheed Martin craft. I mean, obviously, I've been saying it's a man-made craft for years. I don't want to come across as sour grapes, but I think News Nation really should credit where they do their research. But let's dive straight away into what the evidence is that it probably isn't a non-human intelligence UFO, and it's probably a man-made craft. The number one piece of evidence is staring everybody in the face, and that's the case with Calvin and Rendlesham Forest and the Tic Tac. Just by asking this very simple question: where did they see them? In all three cases, the answer to where did they see it is staring you in the face. So in the Calvin case, it was here, it was in LFA 14, which is a low-level Scottish Highland region test zone where exotic equipment can be tested. In the Rendlesham Forest incident, as you know, it's surrounded by Britain's advanced physics laboratories. Orford Ness, powered by Sizewell A, Bawdsey Manor, head of continuous wave plasma induced radar technology, and the very secret British Telecom laboratory at Martlesham Heath, where SRI and Raytheon, Plessy, and other people working on advanced British physics. And right in the middle of it were two American NATO Air Force bases, Bentwaters and Woodbridge, and between them was a scrubby piece of government-owned woodland called Rendlesham Forest. So even if it was a flying saucer from the planet Zog, they chose to come to a closed military test area to do their visualization. Well, of course they didn't. I mean, it's obvious that whatever happened at Rendlesham was part of the surrounding area. Whatever happened at Calvin happened there because it was in military protected airspace. You know, the UFO knew that they didn't want to, in British terms, bust CAA, the equivalent to the FAA flight rules, because they were in an MOA military operational area that wouldn't crash into Ryanair. Why? And then we'll get on to the Tic Tac and David Fravor and San Diego. Well, here it is. It's in the Nimitz or this MOA where they can test advanced propulsion devices. Why would a flying saucer appear in an MOA? Well, again, to protect it from commercial air traffic. All right, let's go over what I have said for years that I think, and I don't really know the answer to this, but I've done research, and I was very, very much contacted by a Canadian excellent researcher called Joshua Bertrand, who blew my mind about the Tic Tac. So originally, I saw that it was in an MOA. As a private pilot, I realized that's a kind of protected airspace where multiple agencies can operate simultaneously under a controlling authority. So when the US Navy are there doing live fire exercises, if Lockheed Martin or the DOE are testing other equipment in the MOA, because it's a sensible place to test it, all you have to do is be under communication. And so there's one controlling authority who's saying, well, DOE are over there, Navy are over there. As long as everybody's talking, you can get on with it. But that's not what happened. The Nimitz was doing their live fire exercises using the Nimitz task force and using the Princeton to check the area in case there was any incursion into the MOA by commercial traffic. Who's the other people that we keep seeing on our radar doing weird stuff? Because we're doing live fire exercises, so the rule is if there's somebody that you're not in contact with who isn't communicating, you have to stop live fire exercises. I wish David Fravor would just come out and say that. He knows that really true, and the Princeton people. So they saw something on radar. They would have contacted San Diego, who control it. Maybe it's controlled also from San Clemente Island. I'm not sure. I think it's the San Diego controller is the person that you have to contact if you want to operate in that MOA. They had to stop their exercise, and they sent Fravor and Dietrich and two other planes. There was a whole bunch of eyes in the sky that day to go and investigate what the Princeton was seeing on their radar. So the Princeton was seeing an object that appeared from underwater and hovered over the water, and then was going vertically in the air occasionally, up and down. And it's a very unknown object. They wouldn't have known what it was. So fair enough. I mean, they sent a bunch of F-18s to go over and investigate, and they saw it. There, hovering above some water that was disturbed, was this 40-foot long white object. And when Fravor went down to it with his other wingmen keeping high, he circles down, and when he gets down towards it, the object goes vertically. Now, this is so important, and I wish people would stop talking about it flying off horizontally. No, Fravor says the item that he saw, which was 40-foot long, white, first of all, he sees disturbed ocean, and then an oscillation of the ocean, and then it went up vertically. Now, that is all emblematic of this thing called an Aerogel vacuum drone. It's totally what it does. So what is it? Well, it's a pseudo satellite. It's commissioned by the DOE. It was initially developed the technology to make a material that you could make buoyant by vacuum, which is a hard thing to do because obviously under a vacuum it would collapse. But it doesn't collapse because it's an aeroloi, which is a spun metal aerogel, but it's made out of metal, so it's very strong, and it's vacuum, so it's buoyant. And it needs to be enormous to get the buoyancy it requires. It's launched underwater from a submarine asset. It comes up. It's also hydroscopic, so it doesn't get wet by the water when it's launched by a submarine asset. It hovers above the surface, bubbles in the water, and orientates itself, a bit like orientating the bed of a 3D printer. It goes backwards and forwards to check it's correctly orientated now in air, and then it evacuates itself by pumping out any remnants of air pressure inside the aeroloi, and then it shoots up vertically only. There is no reports of it going horizontally, none whatsoever. So what is it? Well, it's a pseudo satellite, probably. I don't really know, but this is what I'm thinking it is, that it is man-made. It was tested in MOA. It probably is an aeroloi drone. Commissioned by DOE for the NRO. The technology for the aeroloi, thank you Joshua Bertrand, comes out of Los Alamos from an independent laboratory who worked there on aerogel type stuff. It's not a gel, it's a metal foam. There's a patent, so we know that it exists. It describes it as a Tic Tac shape and it's 40 foot long. It needs to be 40 foot long to have that amount of negative buoyancy. It carries synthetic aperture radar and optical surveillance. It's a long loitering drone that you would have over Gaza, you'd have over Iran. Interestingly, this is very interesting. Did you know that synthetic aperture radar can also do metal finding? So it can actually do mineral finding. It knows a specific gravity and can flag a specific gravity of a material. If you remember, John Glenn, after the Cuban Missile Crisis, flew over Cuba with such a device that could find a very heavy, dense metal of a radioactive material to see if any of the Russian nuclear bombs and missiles were still in Cuba or surrounding islands. But what he amazingly found is he also found gold in sunken treasure under the ocean, because the machine, which was a type of SAR radar that can measure specific density of metal, found gold. So that's why the John Glenn gold map in the Caribbean came about. The other side effect of this SAR technology is that it can measure the specific density of a material. And I hear that the American military uniforms have a belt buckle which is of exactly the right size. And if you look up, as I've done many times, who makes American uniform belt buckles. It's made by a very high-tech company. So if you are in the military, don't ding or chip or whittle away your belt buckle, because your belt buckle is the way of identifying you. Um, Sadly, if you fall in combat and need to be retrieved by SAR radar, they're made by this company as part of the uniform. So they're a way of, on the battlefield, seeing where all your blue American soldiers are and where the enemy is. You can track every single belt buckle. That's what I hear. So that's the use of these drones. They're long loitering pseudo-satellite, 70, 80,000 feet drones. They are coated with a metamaterial, so they're radar reflecting, or they divert. They actually diffract radar, so they're invisible to radar. They're also visually, optically invisible. They're long loitering. They keep in their position with small electrically, obviously solar powered thrusters, but they don't have to position keep very much. As long as they're in maybe a 5-10 kilometer radius, they're fine. You can put up a whole bunch of them so you can get synthetic aperture offset. Oh, hang on, let's test them in somewhere. Let's test them quite close to where we're making them, possibly by Lockheed Martin. Obviously, it wasn't developed by Lockheed Martin, but they might have gone into production to make lots of them. And let's test them off the coast of San Diego in a perfectly legal MOA where multiple agencies can operate. So Calvin, the same, southern Scotland flight zone. It's the most popular place in Britain to test stuff. It's the most used low-flying area of Great Britain, and Rendlesham, of course, as you know, is in Suffolk, surrounded by military laboratories. So ask the big question: where and when? And you'll get big answers. Ross, yeah, great. Yeah, you've revealed stuff that we've known for a while. You don't credit people who you take the research from. I very much credit Joshua Bertrand for telling me and showing me the patent for Aerogel vacuum drones. Thank you, Joshua. I think it's very important to give credit where credit's due. But, yep, it's a man-made craft, probably. I think everything that Commander Fravor says is true, but I wish Commander Fravor would explain that during the Nimitz operation, in that Nimitz MOA off San Diego, you can have multiple agencies operating, and that the reason that he was sent out was because the live fire exercises had to be stopped due to something which was unknown. And that's what they saw. There's one person who knows the answer to all this, and that's the MOA controller, but I think based in San Diego or San Clemente Island, who would know on the date of the Nimitz sighting who was operating in his or her MOA, because they would have registered their intention to actually operate. It'd be very interesting to see if there was a log filed under Lockheed Martin, which I guess is going to be the answer. Here's a film I made years ago, very much answering viewers' questions about the Tic Tac encounter, where it's very clear to me and my viewers that it probably is a man-made craft. There are still questions. The one question which I don't know the answer to, and I've reached out to Joshua today to try and explain, is that the Princeton says that not only did the craft ascend very fast, it also descended very fast. Now that doesn't make any sense to me, because when you repressurize a vacuum aerogel drone, it would come down at 1G. So it seems to, there's reports of it coming down at incredible speeds and then hovering over the sea. I don't know how it would do that. So maybe there's some other technology involved. But the big picture, Ross, the big picture, viewers, is where did they see it? And they saw it in a military test area. They saw Calvin in a military test area. The Rendlesham Forest incident occurred in a military physics test area. Have a great day. The truth is out there. Whatever. Hey, wonderful people, and I really mean wonderful. In reply to my Tic Tac and Calvine film yesterday, some of you have reached out to share information, stuff that you actually know. Today I'm going to read out a couple of your comments which move this story forward. This one's from Fraser Connell 21. He's a well-informed chappie. He says, if a transmedium craft started its operation underwater, could you imagine how it would cause hydrogen and oxygen in the seawater to separate and boil? Now that would cause a surface effect similar to what was seen by Commander Fravor as it was being vented from the ocean. You obviously know your stuff. Yes, I think you're on to a good point here, Fraser. It's very likely that the craft was launched underwater. The Aerogel drone type craft, and I've no idea whether it was, but Aerogel drones can be hydrophobic. They repel water. If you put that material in water, it doesn't get wet. There's like a surface tension between water and the object, so that it can actually go underwater in a bit of a bubble, making it human technology transmedium. It then would pop up to the surface and oscillate as its vacuum pumps were evacuating all the air out of it. It would be seen to wobble around a bit, probably in a bit of a racetrack human programmed orbit, oscillating, and then it would fly up. It actually flew up when, very specifically when, Fravor and Dietrich and the other people in their F-18s saw it. It was aware of the Navy overhead. Somebody was monitoring this situation. It was definitely intelligence. Was it alien or was it the Department of Energy? You decide. And I really thank Murgatroyd 999. Dave actually reached out and answered the question that I had, and that is, surface and air operations in that MOA off the coast of Southern California are controlled by FAC-SFAC, Fleet Area Control and Surveillance Facility San Diego. So they're the controlling authority, based out of Navy Base Coronado. So excuse my pronunciation. Naval Air Station North Island with a small detachment on San Clemente Island, not Catalina. Yeah. Okay, that's great. San Clemente Island is used exclusively by the Navy, with the SEALs using it for a lot of explosive training. I think it is highly unlikely that if the Tic Tac was a black project SAP, that it was being officially operated and sanctioned by FAC-SFAC in the same working area of the MOA as the Nimitz and the Princeton. Yeah, it's very odd. The controlling authority is responsible for coordinating and deconflicting anything that appears in these MOAs. There was no way that they would allow a Tic Tac type craft to operate in the same area at the same time as the aircraft carrier Nimitz, without Fravor and his chain of command being aware of it. The danger of 5,000 plus human lives and billions of dollars of hardware from an unknown craft not being under positive control from the controllers on the Princeton or airborne controllers on board E-2 Hawkeyes in such close proximity to a nuclear-powered ship like the Nimitz is not something that would be sanctioned by command. It is possible, though, that a black project SAP could have unofficially operated the Tic Tac without sanctions, but the risks seem to make that rather implausible. Princeton had been seeing objects on the radar for days before Fravor saw the Tic Tac. So thank you, that's great. We now know who were the controlling authority. In a follow-up to that reply, the excellent Dom Furlong, who is a patron and a long-time viewer, says, it may have been a rare crossover incident to test the technology. There is a facility on the island, that's San Clemente Island, housing LIP technology. He knows what he's talking about. I always believe that is where the projections come from. Okay, so projections? What's all this about? Well, Dom Furlong and I have long discussed whether plasma laser projections that can project ghost aircraft and can be projected over a great distance, a technology that is being worked on and has been deployed in pods now, you can actually make a 3D looking replica aircraft. Think of a cat and a laser pointer. You can wave this thing around. It looks real, it looks three-dimensional, it looks solid, but in fact it's a holographic type, but it's not a hologram. It's a laser plasma projection of an object. A simple object back then would be Tic Tac shaped. It's now in the shape of F-35s. I mean, it's definitely a technology that exists. It defies all the laws of physics because it doesn't have any physics of a solid object because it's just a projection. I still think that's possible, but I'm also interested in aerogel drones being transmedium hydrophobic and being able to ascend vertically only at a great rate of knots. The other thing that I forgot to say is about the CAP point issue, where the Tic Tac goes up and then it flies down to the CAP point and takes up a racetrack type holding pattern. Well, think about this. Maybe there's two. One flew up, and over the CAP point, one flew down. It's not necessarily the same one, because it doesn't have horizontal speed. Why would an alien technology take up a very established human racetrack type holding pattern? No, that'd be something that would be programmed by humans, I suspect. Today I'm formally reaching out, obviously, to David Fravor and Alex Dietrich to actually tell me what the operation was like in the MOA. Just confirm whether, as a humble Cessna private pilot, I've got it roughly right that live fire exercises would cease if there was a non-communicating aircraft on your radar. And talk about the duration of the sighting and talk about who the controlling authority is. And also, if you work at the Navy Controlling Authority in the San Diego area, please get in touch and just tell me about day-to-day operations. Tell us how multiple parties can work safely in your MOA area and how you do it. That would be fascinating. Thanks, everybody. Obviously, a whole bunch of people said it's an alien craft, and yep, it could be. Who knows? I'm not really saying what the craft was. What I'm saying is it has some strange characteristics of being in a very specific military operational area. Thanks everybody for watching, and thanks everybody for making smart comments. Because of you, the truth is out there.